All right. Well, it's so good to have all of you here. We're going to have plenty of time afterwards as well for book signings and the like. Let me just check something real quick here. We're so glad all of you are here today with us. Wow, right now we have over 100 cities from around the world live streaming with us. Let's say hi in over 4 countries. Hello to everyone who is live streaming with us tonight. For those of you who don't know, I'm Pastor Mark Biltz of Shaddai Ministries. And I am so excited to have our guest speaker here tonight. His name is Joseph Farah. And we have a flyer in the back, too, if you want to take one home with you. But the thing is, I want you to know, is he is the founder, the editor, and the CEO of WorldNet Daily. That's right. WorldNet Daily is basically the world's leading independent internet news source. And believe it or not, WorldNet Daily Books has produced the highest percentage of New York Times bestsellers in the world. Joseph Farah himself has authored and co-authored 13 books which have sold over 5 million copies. He produced many documentaries, including the Isaiah 9:10 Judgment and another book and documentary you might be familiar with, Blood Moons. Woohoo! So Joseph is a good friend of mine as well. He's been following El Shaddai Ministries since 2008 when I first made the discovery of the Blood Moons. He was right on top of that on his website promoting the teaching. And it was last year when, 4 other people had written books on my material, and I hadn't written a book yet. And he said, Pastor Mark, I think you're the one that knows this information. You need to get this out. And so he's the one that motivated me to get the book written. He just said, all I need from you is 60,000 words in the next month. Okay. But I'm deeply indebted and grateful for Joseph Farah for all the work that he's done in getting the Christian message really to the world. His internet is just phenomenal, and let's give Joseph Farah a big hand.
Thank you, Pastor Mark. I thought I knew Pastor Mark pretty well. In fact, we hung out the last day or two. He taught me how to pronounce Puyallup. So I thought I would teach him how to pronounce my name properly. It's Farah. Yeah. Which in Arabic means joy. For what it's worth, just point that out. Greetings in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, everybody. It's great to be with you. I've eavesdropped on a lot of you over the years on the internet. I love your pastor. I just think, for folks who live in this area, you're so fortunate to have a congregation like this. I can tell you, it's not every community anywhere in the United States that has this kind of resource. Just a great and gifted teacher of the Word. Okay, I'm going to begin today by first giving you a little bit of my story, telling you about some of the work we're doing for the kingdom, and then sharing some news about prophecies that are literally, I believe, being fulfilled in our world before our eyes today, but not really getting much attention here in the United States, and not being seen anywhere, for that matter, in the context that I'm going to try to show you through the scriptures. Got to keep up with my PowerPoint here. The Lord has led me through some truly amazing experiences in my life, I must say. Despite the wonderful introduction, there's a lot about me you don't know. The kinds of things that aren't in the official bio, if you know what I mean. Now, you probably know, for those of you who, visit WND.com, that I'm the founder of WND.com, the co-founder, I should say, because my wife Elizabeth was right there the entire way. And as you know, WND was formerly known as WorldNet Daily. We ditched that a few years ago because it was a mouthful for people. They could never remember it. They would butcher it and come up with all kinds of names, and I'd say, what? And so we thought we'd make it simple with WND.com. And it is the oldest independent news service on the internet. But maybe you don't know, because I didn't even figure this out until fairly recently, that WND.com is the largest believers website in the world. And I don't mean the largest Christian news site. I mean the largest Christian website in the world. How many of you go there for your news? Good. See, we got room for growth here. So I'm glad I'm giving you a little intro here. There's a growing number of alternative news and information sources on the internet. There are other conservative sites. Sometimes people look at us that way. There are other independent news sites. When I say independent, I mean we were the first to create a news agency specifically with the internet in mind. And we also mean independent in the sense of independent, really independent. Anyway, some of these sites are good, some are bad, but only recently did it dawn on me, after some research, that WND is the biggest Christian website. Now that includes all ministry sites, Christian broadcast sites, Christian teaching sites, Christian e-commerce sites, Christian publication sites, everything. It's bigger than Rick Warren's website. It's bigger than the Vatican's website, just to give you. So I'm sorry for standing up here and bragging a little bit, but when I figured that out, I said, wow, this is a real blessing. It's also kind of sad to me that Christians are using this medium so ineffectively as to let me get that kind of audience without some competition. It was not our business objective to be the largest Christian website. It was just something the Lord did without our asking or even thinking about it or dreaming about it. It's also a tremendous responsibility. I do remember thinking when we were just starting up, some 17 years ago, that WND might someday be the semi-official news service of the millennial kingdom. That occurred to me. And maybe, Lord willing, it will be. But on with the more of the things you don't know about me and WND. How did I get like this? Those of you who know me and my work the best and the deepest may be the most shocked by what you learned tonight. Did any of you know that I am a former revolutionary communist? Okay. Did you know that I once served as Jane Fonda's bodyguard? Okay. I was radical. I was an off-the-charts, extreme left-winger as a youth, and I was arrested in anti-war demonstrations and riots. I published underground newspapers. I wrote for some of the most radical national and regional publications in the country, and there's more. I hung around with some of the most notorious radicals, people like Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn of the Weather Underground, just like you know who, the current occupant of the White House. I've never really talked about this much publicly or written about some of the things I did back in those days, so this is something of a first for me. That's me. at 18 years old. That's not the longest my hair got, by the way. I just want you to know that. That's my college freshman official picture. But all of those experiences have given me, I believe, a special insight into what's going on in America and the world today because of my youthful radicalism, not my grades. I was recruited, much like our president, our current president, for full ride scholarships at some of America's most prestigious colleges. Now, unlike our president, I didn't accept any of them because I thought it would be too bourgeois. Know what means bourgeois? So that's the truth. And I'm glad I didn't, because it was at a rather non-prestigious working class state university in New Jersey that I got saved. Yes. As you can see, I am a big-time sinner saved by grace. I got saved after reading Hal Lindsey's late great Planet Earth. How many of you heard that story before? It happened to be given to me by my best friend, the son of a Spanish-speaking Baptist minister who grew up in the same very rough and tumble town as me, Paterson, New Jersey, and he remains my best friend to this day. I also got seriously convicted about becoming a journalist in college. Besides wanting to be the shortstop for the New York Yankees before Derek Jeter was ever born, being a journalist is the only job I really ever wanted. And I got the opportunity to do literally everything one can do professionally, from investigative reporting to becoming a Middle East correspondent to running daily newspapers in major markets to founding the first independent internet news service. It was when I was running the news operation of the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner back in the 1980s that I got to meet Hal Lindsey. I wrote a story about him. We hit it off. And for a decade or longer, I worked very closely with Hal, all the while pursuing my newspaper career. And I ended up collaborating with Hal Lindsey on half a dozen books. I started and edited his newsletter for 10 years. I helped script his TV show, and he remains to this day a very good friend. Well, Hal really inspired my love of the Lord and Israel, and it was studying prophecy that made me realize the significance of Israel. It was studying prophecy that gave me, an Arab-American kid who grew up idolizing, yes, Yasser Arafat and the terrorists, a love for the Jewish people and a better understanding of the roots of Christianity. A faith I don't think you can really appreciate fully without comprehending how Israel-centric it truly is. There's a lot more you don't know about my notorious past, but it will have to wait for another time. I'm not going to tell you any more about my communist revolutionary days or what it was like being Jane Fonda's bodyguard. You will have to wait for the book on all that, if I ever write it. But I will tell you a few other things. Any baseball fans in the audience? Anybody know who that is? That's Ernie Banks. Baseball fans will appreciate this. I'll tell you that even though I did not get to be the shortstop of the New York Yankees, I did get to found the longest-running fast-pitch Hollywood softball league, which is still going strong today, by the way. I did get to play shortstop there for 10 years, and I even got to manage and play with Hall of Famer Ernie Banks for 2 seasons. He was my first baseman. I was the shortstop. Now, why am I telling you that? Because that's evidence that God really does give us the desires of our hearts, don't you think? Because I wasn't really that good. But the Lord was opening doors for me. He was giving me experiences that even before I knew Him would make me a better servant in the future. Professionally, he gave me what I wanted or thought I wanted, all the while teaching me things that would be of value in working on behalf of the kingdom. For instance, even though I didn't get to attend one of those prestigious colleges as a student, I got to teach journalism at UCLA. Go Bruins. I loved newspapers. I loved everything about them. And even as a kid, I would write all the time, short stories, school newspapers, underground newspapers. I loved to read and write. I loved to experience things and write about them. And I loved everything about the process of publishing. Long before we had computers, I loved even the process of printing and presses. So it was natural that I'd become a reporter, an editor. By the time I was 27, I was the youngest senior newspaper executive in the country, running the newsroom of the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, working with some of the most gifted and innovative men and women in the business. As I mentioned, I even had the opportunity to be a Middle East correspondent for the Hearst Corporation, which began my love of Israel. When I was 33, I was running a daily newspaper in a large chain of community newspapers in Southern California. And when I was 35, I was running the Sacramento Union, the oldest daily west of the Mississippi, in the capital of the largest state in the country. A paper famous for being the place where Mark Twain got his start. The original literary home of Mark Twain, Bret Harte, and Herb Caen. It was during those years in the early 1990s, years before the internet was invented by Al Gore, that I had the opportunity to visit the Silicon Valley to see for myself the emerging technology that would change the world so dramatically in a few years. And I was there trying to figure out a way to use those technologies to save the newspaper business that I loved so much. Newspapers were in big trouble long before the internet came along. Circulations were declining largely because of the inefficiency of the delivery costs as the population spread out over larger geographical areas as, suburbia spread. There was also the problem, of course, that newspapers were really not serving their communities. Newspaper people did not share the values of those they supposedly served. They were people like me, radicals, people who wanted to restructure our world, people who grew up without God, without the guardrails of moral absolutes, without an appreciation of how America was a blessed nation. That's why what we euphemistically call today the mainstream media is still losing its monopoly hold on audiences, no matter what medium they use. Anyway, though I did not immediately discover something that would help me expand the audience of the Sacramento Union, the Lord allowed me to get a very early glimpse of the technology that would give me the opportunity to launch WorldNet Daily, or WND.com, it is known today. I got this vision for what I described in those days as an electronic newspaper. It was a big deal in 1997. And that year, my wife Elizabeth said, when are you going to stop talking about this idea and do it? I didn't think I had the resources to do it, but we tried it anyway. We created the website in May 1997 when there were still only between 1 and 2 million people total on the internet. And we were blown away by the response. We never promoted it. We didn't have any resources to do that. We didn't promote it as a Christian news site. We just did the best journalism we could do with our Christian worldview. And it took off in an unprecedented way. Many challenges over the course of the next 17 years, still do today, but we literally have seen miracle after miracle pull us through. Over the years, WND expanded from a website to a book publishing enterprise, as Pastor Biltz mentioned, more recently into a movie-making company with more and more experiments in what will soon be a budding TV network. It's all supported by a remarkably vibrant e-commerce platform, called the WND Superstore and advertising to a targeted audience of about 8 million worldwide. So the fruit is really beginning to show. This spring, just before Passover, we released a book and movie combination with somebody I think you might be familiar with. His name is Mark Biltz. And it's about something you might have heard about called the blood moons phenomenon, which will be with us through Sukkot 2015. Let's take a look at the trailer for that book, because I don't know if Mark has ever shown it.
The Bible says that the heavens declare the glory of God. In Isaiah, in Joel, in the Gospels, in Revelations, about there will be signs in the sun and the moon, where the sun would turn to sackcloth and the moon would turn to blood. The scientific website, NASA, has 5,000 years of eclipses. Several thousand years in the past, thousands of years in the future. And the reason why is because God is very mathematical. He set up everything like his own personal watch, his own time clock. And so I wanted to see if there were any significant solar lunar eclipses over the next 5 or 6 years. In 2014 and 2015, there were 4 total lunar eclipses in a row. Well, how often does that happen? So I went back to NASA's website in history, and I noticed there were not 4 blood moons in a row at all in the 1800s, in the 1700s, or in the 1600s. So I thought, wow, this might be something unique. And then I noticed it happened twice in the 1900s. Israel became a nation in 1948. And then you have these 4 blood moons in 1949 and 1950. And then in 1967 and 1968, to have Israel recapture Jerusalem, the holy city, to have it back in their hands. But I went ahead and went back to 2014 and 2015, and I was looking at the dates. These series of eclipses are truly astronomical. To have these events happen and then also tied to what prophetically the Bible says is going to be happening with Israel. During these next 2 years, not only 4 blood moons, but a total solar eclipse, a partial solar eclipse. And when it comes to sending signals, God wants to work according to his calendar, not ours. We know when they fall on the feast days, God is trying to tell us something.
Now, I don't suppose I can tell you anything about that book or movie that you don't already know. That's my story, and this has taken longer than I expected it to be, but that's okay. We got a lot more to go. And all of that is a prelude to the heart and soul of my message today. So far, my stories today really have one thing in common, besides being about me and my work. I think you can see that they are very Israel-centric, and that's as it should be. But remember, I am an Arab American. Now, I don't call myself a Gentile because I'm in covenant with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I believe the Torah is for today. I follow the Torah to the best of my ability. With the help of the Ruach Kodesh, I observe the Sabbath, love Israel, and I follow Yeshua HaMashiach. So don't call me a Gentile. Most of us are familiar with all the promises to the house of Israel. But as an Arab American, I've always been interested in the special promises of God to the Arab people, the other children of Abraham, the brothers from another mother, the promises to the other peoples of the Middle East, promises that begin way back in the tents of Abraham involving his first son, Ishmael. Now, most importantly, I want to show you how we can see them already being fulfilled today, or at least foreshadows of their fulfillment. We all know about those promises from Genesis 17, 18, 19. And Abraham said unto God, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before thee." Abraham had a great love for his son Ishmael. And we see in the next two verses that God made Abraham a promise about his first son born to Hagar. And God said, "Sarah thy wife shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him, an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard thee. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation." Well, what nation was that? I always wondered, what was this great nation that Ishmael founded? I've always been a little confused about that. No doubt there have been nations founded by the sons of Ishmael that were great in the sense of terrible great. But is that all God meant? Did he mean Babylon, Assyria, Egypt? Did he mean terrible great in the sense of those past empires? Or is there more meaning in that term great? Is there yet a promise to Abraham yet to be fulfilled? Let's go to Genesis 21, where we see the promise repeated to Hagar the Egyptian. You know the story. Isaac is weaned, Abraham has a feast, and Ishmael is mocking his younger brother Isaac. Hagar and Ishmael are cast out. The promise to Abraham is repeated. But when Hagar finds herself in the wilderness about to perish with Ishmael, an angel appears to her in verse 17. And God heard the voice of the lad, and the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven and said unto her, "What aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thine hand, for I will make him a great nation." You know the rest. But what nation was promised to Ishmael? Well, as you know, there was a well of water there when God opened Hagar's eyes. And verse 20 and 21 say, "And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the bottle with water and gave the lad to drink. And God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness and became an archer. And he dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt." So I want to know, where is the wilderness of Paran? It must be pretty close to Egypt. Some say it's in the Sinai, others say it's in the Judean desert. Islamic legend says it's in Mecca. I think we can rule that out. Hagar was an Egyptian. Ishmael's wife was from Egypt. I'm pretty sure she was on her way back to Egypt. There's a definite Egypt connection here, so file that away for a few moments. But what do we learn next about Ishmael? We know that he reunites with Isaac at the death of Abraham. They buried him in a cave in Hebron. Then Abraham gave up the ghost and died in a good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people. And his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite, which is before Mamre. We know when he died, where his people lived, the 12 tribes. And these are the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years, and he gave up the ghost and died and was gathered unto his people. And they dwelt from Havilah unto Shur, that is before Egypt, as thou goest toward Assyria, and he died in the presence of all his brethren. So where are Havilah and Shur? No one's quite sure about Havilah, but some Bible scholars believe it is Assyria. As for Shur, this is where Hagar was heading when she fled from Abraham and Sarai before returning, Genesis 16:7. She was heading toward Egypt, her homeland. So best guess, the 12 tribes of Ishmael at the time of his death were spread out from Egypt to Assyria, all within reasonable traveling distance to Israel. So what, you say? Does that sound familiar to you Bible students out there? Where else do we hear about a link between Egypt and Assyria? Well, we'll get back to that. But before we do, we're going to explore an end times prophecy that is already literally unfolding before our eyes today. Then we'll see how it may very well tie into the Lord's promised blessing on Ishmael, who, while he was not Abraham's heir, the Lord did bless him for the sake of Abraham. And if you've got your Bibles with you, you might want to turn to Isaiah 19, because we're going to be there for a while. The burden of Egypt. Behold, the Lord rideth upon a swift cloud, and shall come into Egypt, and the idols of Egypt shall be moved at his presence, and the heart of Egypt shall melt in the midst of it. Now, this verse tells us something most believers rarely consider. That Yeshua, when he returns, is not just coming to the Mount of Olives. He's got other business to attend to. Yes, we know that Isaiah 19 in part deals with events that took place when Egypt and Judah were conquered by Babylon, but there are clearly some unfulfilled prophecies here too. And we'll see those throughout this chapter. It's not unusual, for prophecies to have multiple fulfillments. And I believe the first verse tells us Yeshua is actually going to visit Egypt, bringing both judgment and salvation. That's if you believe the Word of God is taken literally, as I do. Now, it's amazing when you read the prophecies about Yeshua's return that he actually personally visits judgment on other nations. We know, for instance, from Isaiah 63 that he is going to visit Edom and Bozrah, bring judgment on them. Let's take a look at that. Who is this that cometh from Edom with dyed garments from Bozrah? This that is glorious in his apparel, traveling in the greatness of his strength. I that speak in righteousness, mighty to save. Wherefore art thou red in thine apparel, and thy garments like him that treadeth in the wine fat? I have trodden in the winepress alone, and of the people there was none with me. For I will tread them in mine anger, and trample them in my fury, and their blood shall be sprinkled upon my garments, and I will stain all my raiment. For the day of vengeance is in my heart, and the year of my redeemed is come. Now, where are Edom and Bozrah? Well, if they haven't moved with the descendants of the people, as some suggest, they are southwest of Israel. Edom, whose capital city was Bozrah, would correlate today with the nations of Jordan and at least part of Saudi Arabia. There's going to be judgment of the Lord there. And Isaiah tells us the Lord himself alone will bring it about. Likewise, Yeshua is going to ride a swift cloud to Egypt upon his return. Let's go back to Isaiah 19 and look at verses 2 through 4. In the next 3 verses, we're told there is going to be a civil war in Egypt with the land succumbing to a cruel king. Now, it's not hard to imagine that scenario today. Egypt has already been racked by infighting. There have been 3 major power changes in the last 3 years. And for the moment, there seems to be some stability there with a military government that may be a big improvement over the brief Muslim Brotherhood reign of Mohammed Morsi. And I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight everyone against his brother and everyone against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. And the spirit of Egypt shall fail in the midst thereof, and I will destroy the counsel thereof, and they shall seek to the idols and to the charmers and to them that have familiar spirits and to the wizards. And the Egyptians will I give over unto to the hand of a cruel lord, and a fierce king shall rule over them, saith the Lord of hosts. But what comes next is what I really want to focus on your attention on, because something is happening right now, today, that seems unmistakably like a precursor to fulfilled prophecy. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Egypt? Very good. Usually they say the pyramids, but undoubtedly we do think of the pyramids. But the next thing you think of is the Nile. The Nile is the longest river in the world. It's been the story of Egypt's civilization throughout time. It's the source of life there. It's been the source of prosperity, the lifeline of the economy. It defines Egypt. Egypt was the breadbasket for the Middle East because of the Nile. The next few verses prophesy something almost unimaginable about the Nile, Egypt's only source of water. And the waters shall fail from the sea, and the river shall be wasted and dried up. And they shall turn the rivers far away, and the brooks of defense shall be emptied and dried up. The reeds and flags shall wither. The paper reeds by the brooks, by the mouth of the brooks, and everything sown by the brooks shall wither, be driven away, and be no more. The fishers also shall mourn, and all they that cast angle into the brooks shall lament, and they that spread nets upon the waters shall languish. Moreover, they that work in fine flax, and they that weave networks shall be confounded, and they shall be broken in the purposes thereof, all that make sluices and ponds for fish. Now, what is going on here? I mean, there's a lot of verses there about water. The Nile, the source of all water in Egypt, dries up. How is that even possible? Is this simply an act of God, or are there already strong indications of something like this happening in Egypt today? Is it possible this could actually be the result of man's work or some kind of natural phenomenon under God's direction and timing? Well, with all that's been going on in the world lately, and in Egypt in the last several years, the biggest single news story, the total preoccupation of the Egyptian people, including Hosni Mubarak, Morsi, the new military regime, is something that most Americans have never heard about. There's a report from Foreign Policy magazine, reprinted in the Toronto Star, March 15th of this year, so we're talking 3 months ago. Egypt's musical chairs government faces enough challenges. So why is a construction project almost 3,000 kilometers from Cairo provoking fears over Egypt's national survival? Egypt and Ethiopia are butting heads over the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, a $4 billion hydroelectric project that Ethiopia is building on the headwaters of the Blue Nile near the border between Ethiopia and Sudan. Cairo worries the mega project, which began construction in 2011, is scheduled to be finished by 2017, could choke the downstream flow of the Nile River right when it expects its needs for fresh water to increase. Now, note that we are talking about a dam project that could threaten Egypt's national survival. That's what this report says in Foreign Policy magazine, which I have to tell you, they don't get hysterical at Foreign Policy magazine. They don't usually do that. And I'm willing to bet most of the very informed people in this audience have never heard about this. You probably also didn't hear about the WikiLeaks document acquired in the fall of 2012 by Stratfor, revealing Egyptian plans to build an airstrip for the express purpose of bombing that dam. That's how serious They have been taking this project in Egypt for years. In June 2013, before he was deposed, Morsi said all options, including military intervention, were on the table if Ethiopia continued to build the dam on the Blue Nile. Ahmed Abdelhalan, a strategic analyst, was quoted in the African newspaper Mashal, March 25th of this year, as saying, Egypt sees its Nile water share as a matter of national security. Ethiopia began diverting some water to the dam last May. That's when things really started heating up in Egypt, with some officials calling for sending commandos or arming local insurgents to sabotage the dam project unless Ethiopia halts construction. Richard Tutwiler, a specialist in water resource management at the American University in Cairo, summed up Egypt's problem. He said, Egypt is totally dependent on the Nile. Without it, there is no Egypt. A report in Water World magazine, I'm sure many of you read Water World magazine, a trade publication of the international water industry, quoted a member of the Egyptian National Panel of Experts studying the effects of the Renaissance Dam as saying Ethiopia's construction of a dam is a catastrophe for his country, which would end up losing 60% of its agricultural land. And he also warned that a collapse of the Renaissance Dam could in turn lead to a collapse of the Aswan Dam, in effect devastating the whole of Egypt. Keep that in mind for later. A report from National Geographic, September 27, 2013, shows Egyptians, from politicians to ordinary citizens, furious, frightened by the implications of Ethiopia's Renaissance Dam. Here's a cab driver, Ahmed Hossan. Ethiopia is killing us. If they build this dam, there will be no Nile. If there's no Nile, then there's no Egypt. Building a dam is tantamount to a declaration of war, said a senior Noor Party official. Meanwhile, Ethiopians living in Egypt are getting beaten up and evicted from their homes due to the panic and the helplessness of everyday Egyptians about this dam. Here are some other news reports that give you an idea of the magnitude of this crisis. In April 2012, Bradley Hope of Egypt's The National reported that the dam could destabilize Egypt in a way that would make the last year of political upheaval look minuscule. Mohammed Nasser el-Din Alam, Egypt's Minister of Water and Irrigation, was quoted in that article as saying, "It will lead to political, economic, and social instability. Millions of people would go hungry. There would be water shortages everywhere. It's huge." Now think about this. The Nile River's length is 4,132 miles. It flows through Tanzania, Burundi, Rwanda, the Congo, Kenya, Uganda, Sudan, Ethiopia, and finally into Egypt. The Greek historian Herodotus called Egypt the gift of the Nile because civilization there depended on the resources of the river. It's true that, without the Nile, there would be no Egypt. To the east and west, desert. The waters of the Nile have served as the means whereby civilizations have gathered along its banks, even to the days before the pharaohs. The natural flow of the Nile is from north to south. Thus, the waters that eventually make their way to Egypt must first pass through the regions of southeastern Africa before emptying into the Mediterranean Sea. Historically, in the spring, the snow on the mountains of East Africa melts, sending a torrent of water that overflows the banks of the Nile and floods the river valley. The rushing river picked up bits of soil and plant life called silt. As the annual flood receded, a strip of black soil emerged every year along the banks of the Nile, and the silt was rich in nutrients, and it provided the people of Egypt with 2 or 3 crops every year. This made the Nile Valley ideal for farming since ancient times. But that's not as true today as it had been in the past. Egypt already had water problems before the Ethiopian Grand Renaissance Dam gets completed. In 1970, the Egyptians constructed the Aswan Dam in southern Egypt to provide water for irrigation, to generate electricity, and to control the floodwaters of the Nile. The original Aswan Dam was an embankment dam situated along the Nile River in Aswan, first built by the British in 1902. And in the 1960s, Gamal Abdel Nasser began building the High Dam. It was a key objective of the socialist Egyptian government following the Egyptian Revolution of 1952. Nasser sought to control, I should say, the flooding that was such a blessing to Egypt in so many ways, to provide water for irrigation and to generate hydroelectricity that would industrialize Egypt. Nasser saw the future of Egypt in industrialization. Nasser's dream was to transform the old-fashioned agricultural economy of Egypt into a modern industrial society, and that required electricity, thus the power plant at the dam. It would also require moving people into cities and wiping out the old ways of raising crops that depended on the regular overflow of the banks on the Nile. In fact, 120,000 people, mostly Nubians, were forcibly relocated to build the dam and Lake Nasser, which is the reservoir into which the Nile now flows. No longer does the Nile overflow its banks the way it did annually before then. The Aswan Dam controls the flow of water. And no longer are the fertile areas along the Nile the source of natural nutrients flowing out of Africa. All that silt has instead been accumulating in the Aswan Dam since 1970 when it was completed, and it's filling up with silt and already choking the flow of water of the Nile during flooding. That 40 million tons now accumulates every year in Lake Nasser and at the dam, diminishing both the capacity of the lake and the flow of water through the dam. In other words, Egypt already had a big water problem before this new dam is built. And the man responsible for that water crisis was Gamal Abdel Nasser, the longtime president and Israel hater, the predecessor of Anwar Sadat. That water problem has already greatly diminished the fishing industry in Egypt, because the water no longer carries those natural nutrients that it picked up in Africa along the way. But as Egyptians have figured out, it could get a lot worse with the building of the dam in Ethiopia. There's more about this prophecy of the Nile found in Ezekiel 29. And it has a lot of relevance to what I'm telling you, especially about the motivations that caused Egypt to build the Aswan Dam. Son of man, set thy face against Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and prophesy against him and against all Egypt. Speak and say, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I am against thee, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, the great dragon that lieth in the midst of his rivers, which hath said, My river is mine own, and I have made it for myself. But I will put hooks in thy jaws, and I will cause the fish of thy rivers to stick unto thy scales, and I will bring thee up out of the midst of thy rivers, and all the fish of thy rivers shall stick unto thy scales. And I will leave thee thrown into the wilderness, thee and all the fish of thy rivers. Thou shalt fall upon the open fields. Thou shalt not be brought together nor gathered. I have given thee for meat to the beasts of the field and to the fowls of the heaven. Isn't it interesting that Egypt is going to be judged for saying, My river is mine own, and I have made it for myself? That is exactly what Egypt did and said when they built the high dam at Aswan. That is what they are still saying today as they do battle with Ethiopia over this new dam. Keep that in mind, but if you Google this stuff, folks, you will see many quotes like that, almost verbatim, right out of Ezekiel. Now look at verses 9 and 10. And the land of Egypt shall be desolate and waste, and they shall know that I am the Lord, because he hath said, the river is mine, and I have made it. So there we see again this display of arrogance from Egypt as it's being judged. Behold, therefore, I am against thee and against thy rivers, and I will make the land of Egypt utterly waste and desolate, from the tower of Syene even unto the border of Ethiopia. Okay, this offers us some other information that we don't see in Isaiah 19, but it's talking about the same thing. Something is going to happen to lay Egypt to waste from the tower of Syene unto the border of Ethiopia. Now, we believe that modern Ethiopia, where they're building the dam that threatens Egypt, is not the same as biblical Ethiopia. A lot of scholars all think that. Most scholars believe it is Sudan, just to the south of Egypt. Nevertheless, it is certainly interesting that Egypt and Ethiopia are linked in this passage. Then the question is, what is Syene? That is much more clear. Syene is Aswan. It's still called that today. It's just an alternative name. It's used interchangeably with Aswan. So it would seem something is going to happen in Aswan that lays Egypt desolate and waste. And it has to do with water from the Nile. Gee, I wonder what that could be with all we have seen thus far. So the question is, this mentions towers. Towers. Are there towers at Aswan today? Yes, there are. There are monuments celebrating the construction of the Aswan Dam. Let's go further to Ezekiel 30. And again, much of Ezekiel 29 and 30 has to do with an earlier judgment of Egypt when it was conquered by Babylon. We know that, along with Judah. But the similarities between these chapters and Isaiah 19, which clearly contains end-time prophecies, suggests there are parallels between a judgment that occurred and a judgment that is still to come. And the Nile would never dried up in the history of the world, so we know that one is still to come. Let's look at Ezekiel 30, 4 through 9. And the sword shall come upon Egypt, and great pain shall be in Ethiopia, when the slain shall fall in Egypt, and they shall take away her multitude, and her foundations shall be broken down. Ethiopia and Libya and Lydia and all the mingled people, and Chub and the men of the land that is in the league, shall fall with them by the sword. Thus saith the Lord, they also that uphold Egypt shall fall, and the pride of her power shall come down. From the tower of Syene shall they fall in it by the sword, saith the Lord. And they shall be desolate in the midst of the countries that are desolate, and her cities shall be in the midst of the cities that are wasted. And they shall know that I am the Lord, when I have set fire in Egypt, and when all her helpers shall be destroyed. In that day shall messengers go forth from me in ships, to make the careless Ethiopians afraid, and great pain shall come upon them, as in the day of Egypt, for lo, it cometh. Now there is this linking here between Egypt and her neighbors. Regardless of exactly where Ethiopia was and is, I doubt anybody really knows, a conflict is taking place. And a conflict is most assuredly brewing in that part of the world right now. And it has to do with the flow of water. And Syene is mentioned again here. What is Syene again? Aswan. Let's go back to where we left off now in Isaiah 19, 11 through 16. Surely the princes of Zon are fools. The counsel of the wise counselors of Pharaoh is become brutish. How say ye unto Pharaoh, I am the son of the wise, the son of ancient kings? Where are they? Where are thy wise men? And let them tell thee now, and let them know what the Lord of hosts hath proposed upon Egypt. The princes of Zon are become fools, the princes of Noph are deceived. They have also seduced Egypt, even they that are the stay of the tribes thereof. The Lord hath mingled a perverse spirit in the midst thereof, and they have caused Egypt to err in every work thereof, as a drunken man staggereth in his vomit. Neither shall there be any kind of work for Egypt, which the head or tail, branch or rush may do. In that day shall Egypt be like unto women, and it shall be afraid and fear because of the shaking of the hand of the Lord of hosts, which he shaketh over it. Now here's more about this judgment in Egypt, a land that has been seduced by its wicked leaders into a perverse spirit that causes error in every way. And then we learned there will be no work in Egypt. Well, you can imagine how little work there would be without the power generated by the Aswan Dam, with no water flowing from the Nile. There would be plenty of fear, I can imagine. But there's fear of something else we learn in the next verse. Very interesting. There's fear of Israel. And then comes the good news of salvation. Isaiah 19, 17 through 25 takes a strange turn here with some good news. And the land of Judah shall be a terror unto Egypt. Everyone that maketh mention thereof shall be afraid in himself because of the counsel of the Lord of hosts, which he hath determined against it. In that day shall 5 cities in the land of Egypt speak the language of Canaan, and swear to the Lord of hosts. One shall be called the city of destruction. In that day shall there be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof to the Lord. And it shall be a sign and for a witness unto the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt, for they shall cry unto the Lord because of the oppressors, and he shall send them a Savior and a great one, and he shall deliver them. And the Lord shall be known to Egypt, and the Egyptians shall know the Lord in that day, and shall do sacrifice and oblation. Yea, they shall vow a vow unto the Lord and perform it, and the Lord shall smite Egypt, he shall smite and heal it, and they shall return even to the Lord, and he shall be entreated of them and shall heal them. In that day there shall be a highway out of Egypt to Assyria, and the Assyrian shall come unto Egypt, and the Egyptian unto Syria, and Egyptians shall serve with the Assyrians. In that day shall Israel be the third with Egypt and with Assyria, even a blessing in the midst of the land, whom the Lord of hosts shall bless, saying, Blessed be Egypt, my people, and Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, mine inheritance. So here we learn that Egypt, without power, without water, without an economy, is afraid of Israel. Does Israel intercede in this conflict in some way? We don't know. But Egypt, with all of the unbelievable problems we've told about, is suddenly afraid of Israel. We also learn that Egyptians will know the Lord in that day, and that 5 cities in Egypt will be speaking Hebrew. We learn that there will be an altar to the Lord where the great pyramids are today, and that the Lord himself will deliver them. Not only will the Lord smite Egypt, but he will heal Egypt. The Lord shall be known to Egypt, and Egyptians, they'll know the Lord in that day, doing sacrifice and oblation and vowing unto the Lord and performing it. Wow. I mean, to me, this is one of the most incredible end times verses that I can think of. The last 3 verses are the good news for the entire region. In that day shall there be a highway out of Egypt to Assyria. Syrian shall come into Egypt. What does that sound like to you? What does that remind you of? Doesn't it hearken back to the promises of Ishmael? In that day shall Israel be a third with who? Egypt and Assyria, even a blessing in the midst of the land, whom the Lord of hosts shall bless, saying, Blessed be Egypt, my people, and Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, mine inheritance. Here is God is talking about Egypt. Blessed be Egypt, my people. Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, mine inheritance. It's like equality between the three. I mean, what an ending. We serve a God of happy endings. That's why I call this presentation the real Mideast peace plan. I know something about the peace plans man has tried. I'm not going to get into that tonight, but I can tell you they're doomed to fail. Egypt and Assyria and Israel, all one big happy family. That's what it's going to be like in the millennial kingdom, which is why I can't wait. Egypt is called God's people, Assyria is called the work of God's hands, and Israel his inheritance. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. And there's that link between Egypt and Assyria I alluded to earlier. It's a link made all the way back in Genesis in our exploration of the promise to Abraham and Hagar about Ishmael. His 12 sons settle in the lands from Egypt to Assyria, and thus Ishmael is reconciled with Isaac and Jacob. Wouldn't Father Abraham be happy about that? Arab and Jew together, the real Mideast peace plan, the only one that will actually work for 1,000 years. Lord bless you and keep you, and Yeshua loves you. Thank you very much, and God bless that man over there, Mark Biltz. Thank you.
We want to give an opportunity if you have any questions. We want to give a few minutes for question and answer, and then we'll dismiss. Does anyone have any questions for Joseph Farah? I see that hand back there. Just a second.
I would like to ask you about that 40 years when the Egyptians will not be able to live in Egypt.
Right. Well, it's a mystery. And I can tell you that way back to the days when I worked with Hal Lindsey, we talked about this prophecy, this Aswan Dam prophecy, and it was his belief, and many prophecy teachers since him, that what it meant was that the Aswan Dam was going to be the target of a nuclear attack. And, you know, if the water is going to be, if there's going to be no life there for basically 40 years, which is what Scripture tells us, that could certainly be one possibility. But I think it's only one possibility. Suppose the dam in Ethiopia broke, and the Aswan Dam broke, and you don't have any water flowing through the Nile. You could also have people not living there for 40 years. So there are other possibilities, but I think it's entirely possible that, the prophecy teachers have been right. There may be a terrible war. It may go nuclear. I wouldn't doubt it.
That's what I was wondering. Do you think that Damascus, the destruction of Damascus, could be what causes the fear towards Israel?
Yeah, well, with Damascus is a different story altogether because it won't ever be inhabited again. But, even that, I'm not sure is a nuclear attack. Because what do we know about nuclear attacks today? That after a few years, you could rebuild a city there. And Damascus is the oldest city in the history of the world. It really is. So the question is, that might not be a nuclear attack. It might be God says, we don't want anybody living here ever again, even into the millennial kingdom. But something is going to happen in Damascus for sure that means it won't ever be a city again. That's not what it says about. That's not what it says about Aswan.
One thing that I think is that, as you know, Nagasaki and Hiroshima after a nuclear attack were rebuilt. So what's different? Well, I think what could be different is all the chemical weapons stored in Damascus. You have a nuclear plant that hits all of the chemical weapons that are there. that could pollute the land, the water, and everything else. That's one thing that could happen.
Thank you for coming tonight, sir. My question is a little different. Since reconnecting the gospel to the Torah, how has it changed your understanding of the Bible?
That's a great question. Well, I mean, it means I have so much more to discover than I ever realized, you know. It was almost like, and of course, when you stumble onto something like this, it's this amazing, and it started for me, I'll tell you how it started for me. My wife, who's a very inquisitive person and who loves Bible study, asked me one day about the fourth commandment. Why is the fourth commandment about the Sabbath, and we have to obey all the other commandments? We don't observe the Sabbath in our household. And I said, honey, you just asked the $64,000 question, and it's frankly something I had wondered about, since I was a kid, going to Catholic school and asking myself that question. Sabbath, we don't observe the Sabbath, and so we embarked on a deep study into that, and that's what leads to so much more. You realize that the church, as we know it today, at least the folks who dominate the church today, really believe that the Torah is no longer relevant to us today. And that was a new discovery right there. I didn't realize that that's what most Christians believe. We were reading the Torah all the time. We were studying the Tanakh. We valued everything about it. We couldn't believe that that's what churches were teaching. Most churches were teaching people. So it opened the doors to Scripture like nothing else, really, since the day I got saved. Because now it's such a rich tapestry to discover.
All right. Okay, one more question here, and then we'll wrap it up. Oh, did you have one? Okay, and Nancy, okay.
What about the Sunni-Shia conflict, and where do you see that going?
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, if I were going to talk about something tonight that wasn't prophecy, but it was what's happening now, that's what I would be talking about. What's happening today in Iraq and soon to be throughout the Middle East is breathtaking in its significance, and I believe very much points to the near fulfillment of prophecy. And I'll tell you why. This group, ISIS, is akin to, where does ISIS get its inspiration for what it's doing? The model is the 8th century army that followed the death of Muhammad, where they swept across the Arabian Peninsula in unbelievable time, into North Africa, into Europe, into India, killing everything in its wake. That's how the Islamic army really became, you could argue, the largest empire in the history of the world. It far exceeded the Roman Empire if you look at the land mass and the number of people under its dominion. And it happened just like that. You ask yourself, how could that happen so quickly? That's what's happening today in Iraq. These folks understand that if you move quickly and you terrorize the people that you're marching toward, they'll faint as you come along. I mean, I watched this stuff on the news, on television. I watched these pictures of these convoys that they're moving in, high speed, 60 miles an hour down the desert. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. These are all these bad guys in one area. Why aren't we hitting them? This is like a great opportunity to me. I mean, an airstrike, you can't miss, But it shows you how much fear that they're instilling, that the Iraqis apparently, didn't have enough wisdom to get their helicopters into the air and blow these convoys to smithereens. And now they've captured all those helicopters. Now they've captured the chemical weapons that we left there. Like, I thought we went to Iraq to get the WMDs and we left them there? And this is insanity. So I think this is a very big deal. I think ISIS is going to be marching not only through Iraq, but through Jordan, through Saudi Arabia, quite possibly. And there's only one army, of course, in the Middle East that can stop them, and that is Israel.
All right, let's give Joseph a big hand. I'm Pastor Mark Biltz, El Shaddai Ministries. We meet right here at 10 o'clock every Saturday morning, and we would love to have you here and celebrate the Sabbath with us. You can also live stream, as we have people all over the world live streaming. Thank you very much.